What's up, everybody? I know I'm in a different location this week than normal. I'm at the NFCA Softball Coaches Convention down in Louisville. Just got done recording this episode with Andy Barkett. Andy has a massive amount of experience coaching baseball at all different types of levels, major league, minor league, college. And so in this episode, he talks about some of the stuff that he's learned along the way. We talk a lot about the mental side of the game planning, and then he's very, very good at picking up pitchers who tip their pitches, so pitch tipping, and he gives some insight into that as well. So hope you enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe. And I'm going to put all of his information in the description if you want to learn more about him. All right, we now welcome on to the podcast, Andy Barkett. Andy, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So you've done, just thinking about your career as a coach, you've coached in the big leagues, you've coached in college, you were a minor league manager. As a player, you played 11 years in the minor leagues, played in the major leagues. And so, you pretty much have been at almost every level of baseball in some capacity. But I know that you're also like really passionate, as am I, on the mental side of the game. And I think that's huge. It's often overlooked, I think. What's what's a way, because here I think one of the things that ends up happening is coaches will say the mental game is important, but they don't necessarily give players like ways to improve upon it. They don't necessarily like expand on it at all. Like, what are some of the ways that you think coaches could start helping players more on the mental side of the game?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And, as a hitting coordinator, like you mentioned, I've done just about everything in the game. Being a hitting coordinator, you're running the hitting program for a minor league organization, which was the last job I had with the White Sox. And, what I found it was that we could really, we could dig in and fix a swing. I felt like, just with technology and drill packages and just what we know about movement now, with strength and conditioning departments and biomechanists, like you can fix a swing. But the challenges that I found were most difficult were the mental game. And actually, I had came up with if I was going to be retained and with the White Sox for another year, I was working on a mental program, and developed a mental program that actually I've been doing some private speaking to teams and organizations, and it's called CORE. I like acronyms, but I think the mental game is the most important part that is severely overlooked in the new era of baseball teaching that we're in. We're very technology driven, and it's super important. Like I don't want to downplay technology at all. I think that um, you know not only am I a baseball coach, but I'm a baseball dad. I have a college baseball player's son, so I'm looking for every competitive advantage to try to develop his game. And heck yeah, I'm going to use technology to find out, a force plates, how much he's, engaging the ground, and the blast motion, what's his early connection score, and is he on plane? And so I want to know all those things, and his spin on Rapsodo and his exit velos and launch angles. They're all super important. But at the end of the day, if your mental game is crappy, then you're going to have a hard time executing anything that you work on. If you're locked up mentally, if your thoughts, pre-swing thoughts or pre-at-bat thoughts or in the batter's box thoughts are jacked up, then you're going to have a hard time executing. So, to answer your question, it's kind of a long-winded answer. But like I said, we talked earlier before we started. I've been in the interview process with major league teams, so I've gotten used to long-winded answers these days. But there's so many different ways. I feel like you have to practice mental techniques just as you practice physical techniques. For example, there's 15 seconds, 18 seconds, whatever it is, depending on guys on base or not, between pitches in a game. And now we have a pitch clock, actually, right? And like before the pitch clock, nobody really understood that time period or could quantify it. And now we can actually quantify it because we have the clock. So, like, what are you doing with that 15 seconds? Because if people smarter than me figured out that in a 3-hour baseball game, there's only about 15 minutes of actual baseball that's played. So there's 2 hours and 45 minutes of either in between innings or in between pitches. heck, that's a lot more time to lock in and concentrate than the actual 15 minutes of action on the field. So in order to manage that 2 hour 45 minutes, which breaks up into 15-second increments, you have to be able to manage your thoughts and manage your brain and be able to refocus and reset yourself during a game. So I mean, you could practice that in batting practice instead of swing, 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 flip, 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 which is unrealistic. The game is not played like that, right? Take a swing, step out of the box, reset yourself, get back in the box, engage the pitcher, whatever your techniques are. And well, like I said, I don't want to go into too much detail, but we have different types of techniques you can give a hitter or a defensive player or a pitcher to manage that 15 seconds in between pitches. As well, just positive affirmations, positive thoughts, redirecting your mind to positivity. There's so much negativity in baseball because you fail so much, and we have to have techniques and ways to embrace the suck instead of tell ourselves that we suck, and that just we start spiraling. Like I said earlier, I'm not just a baseball coach. I'm a baseball and sports dad. My oldest daughter is a college soccer player. My youngest daughter is a high school volleyball player. And I don't know much about soccer and volleyball, but I do know that I watch them go through the mental anguish of the games that they play, along with, my son who went to NC State, as we talked about earlier, his freshman year. It was just kind of a rough experience for him. And then played summer ball, started off kind of shaky in summer ball and was just going through it mentally. And so again, this is kind of what inspired me, my experience as a hitting coordinator and then as a sports dad, to develop this mental skills program, just because, young people these days, it's a different world we live in with social media. So everything that you do is amplified. When I was a minor league baseball player, a million years ago, if I went over 4 and punched out 3 times, you really, nobody knew about it, right? Like there weren't like box scores in the Texas League that you could just click on something and find back when I played. Now if you stink and have a bad night, heck, there's video of it that somebody can look at any point, right? So you make an error to cost somebody the game, it's on Twitter like 15 minutes after the game's over. So it's just changed a lot, and so really the mental game. We've advanced so much in the physical game with technology, and I feel like at times, and we have so many great, wonderful people in baseball, sports psychologists that are mental skills coaches, and I have really good relationships with many of them, and pick their brains, and they really helped me come up with my program. But they excuse me, I feel like we're not doing enough. I feel like that the mental skills development of young athletes in all sports, especially baseball, is lacking, and I feel like it needs to get better. So that's a really long answer of your question, but hopefully I covered what you were looking for.
Well, I know you've been around some of the best players in the game and just in general, just really good players at various levels of the game. Obviously, there's going to be some players stronger on the mental side of the game than not, but I'm sure you've seen some players make some big strides as well on that side of the game. Like, what are some of the things that you've seen from an actual player that maybe you've worked with or that you've just seen from afar? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen them do that really take their mental side of the game and it help their in-game production over time?
Great question. I would say like controlling their breath. Number one, breathing is super important. Especially from the hitting side, when you watch a hitter in between pitches, be able to take the deep breath, like be very routine centric. So I like you said, I've been fortunate to be around some of the greatest players in the game, and JD Martinez, who still continues to produce at a high level, even as he's getting a tick older. But if you watch his at bats, I mean, there's a routine there that is just repeated and repeated and repeated. And what you don't see is the routine that starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon every day, that's repeated and repeated and repeated for 162 games. And then, that same routine is working backwards, is starting in spring training. Heck, he's working on it probably as we speak, and in December getting ready for spring training. So I feel like watching guys trust the routines and really develop effective routines, both mentally and physically, and then be able to carry those into the game and trust their training. When you talk to uh, Navy SEALs and being in professional baseball, you get to meet so many different types of people and interact with so many different types of people from different walks of life, and sharpshooters and in the military. And they'll tell you that in combat that they are calm and under control because they're trusting their training. They're trusting what they have practiced over and over and over again in their routine. And so they're not flustered by what's going on around them, because they're able to lock in and focus due to, I've done this so many times and I'm so comfortable doing it that I don't even think twice about it when I'm trying to, find something in my scope to shoot at or whatever it is. And so I feel like in a much different scale, baseball is very similar at the highest levels, where you have to trust your routines and trust because that, self-doubt is what we're talking about here. We're talking about battling self-doubt and battling, um, you know, just those negative thoughts. And what can you do to combat that? Well, if I trust my training and I trust my technique and I trust everything, all the work that I've done in the preparation, then that helps me eliminate the self-doubt. Mookie Betts is one of the greatest players in our game, and major league players are just as human as you and I. They have self-doubt, and that was one thing that I really was surprised getting to the big leagues as a coach and being around really good players was, dang, they're just as human as minor league players. Like, they doubt themselves as well. And I have to encourage them and pump them up and help them focus and lock in. They have problems off the field, just like minor league players. They have problems off the field just like I do. And so they have to be able to focus at 7 o'clock and lock in to compete. And that's kind of the secret of coaching at the highest level is not really how much technique you can teach them, but really how you can get them to believe in themselves at 7 o'clock, or help them believe in themselves at 7 o'clock when the game starts. So just, I get, and I think those players that are able to play at the highest level, those guys, even when they do have self-doubt, even when they are battling maybe some fear of failure or some failure itself, those guys have this unique ability to post when the bell rings. There's times when Mitch Moreland, who's one of the toughest guys I've ever been around, was not feeling good at the plate. And, he's a country boy from Mississippi. And, he when the bell rang, all day long working with him, I don't feel it. It doesn't feel right, and we're kind of battling back and forth. But when it's time to go, it was time to go. And he's going to go out and fight like heck to give you the best at bats he could that night and help his team win. And that's what, really good players, great players, elite players have, that ability that no matter what's going on, when the bell rings, they're able to get out there and battle. And that's another thing I noticed about big league players. Yes, they doubt themselves like minor league players, but 40,000 people in Fenway Park or Minute Maid Park, whatever it is, and everybody's watching, they're going to fight, they're going to battle, they're going to post.
Yeah, it's almost like at some point, once the game starts, like you said, you ding the bell and it's like, hey, I got what I got at this point. You know what I mean? Like it's compete time. Like we're not worried about mechanics and things like that as much. So I think getting players to that point is very important. But I definitely agree with what you just said right there. And going back to routines, and you mentioned, JD Martinez is very diligent about his routine, and it starts at 2 o'clock. Like, how, as a coach, how do you go about helping a young player find that routine, right? Because there's somebody, JD says he's in his mid-30s now. He understands his swing, all these things like that. So he knows what he needs to do. how would you go about helping a younger player, maybe even just someone like your son or someone your son's age who's in college and still figuring their body out and their swing and things like that?
Yeah, another great question. And actually, my son is quasi home. Stetson's only about 45 minutes away, so he was home for a couple of days, and he has a meeting back there today, but he'll be back. And anyway, he went to hit yesterday, and I wanted to go hit with him, but I wasn't able to. And he said, "Yeah, Dad, it's cool. My routine's in a really good spot right now." And he kind of broke it down for me, and I was like, you know, when he told me that, I smiled. I'm like, you know what? I don't feel bad about not hitting with you today because everything that you just said, it sounds like you're killing it. So that's you're in a good spot. And honestly, you know, that's another great question. When I worked for the White Sox and was the hitting coordinator, one of my first order of business in instructional league when I took over was to get the new prospects, the new draft picks, and to teach them a routine. That was actually the first like, and the coaches got them all together. Hey guys, here's what we're gonna do is we're gonna teach these guys a routine, and so that they can work on it all off season. They come back in spring training and they're different. So number one, you got to have drill packages that are um, focused on movement patterns that help the swing and help the movements of the hitter. And obviously we know so much more about biomechanics and how the body works effectively and the hip rotating underneath the spine instead of around the spine. And we know about how to use the ground now. We know about different angles that the upper body is going to produce. So teaching them various drills, and every hitter's DNA is different. And I say this all the time. So everybody learns differently. I have 6 different drills to show a hitter to teach them how to use the ground effectively. And I'm just throwing numbers out there, but I have a lot of drills for the path. And then I have drills to connect them. And I will say, okay, for example, what we did that instructional league, I remember is I made everybody do all the drills for like 3 days. And some of them hated some of them. And I said, yeah, that's fine. You're not going to like them. And they're going to feel weird and it's going to be different. But when we're done, I want you to pick at least one drill from using the ground and one drill from the path that we had in the different packages, and start to make that a part of you every day. And if you are working on this every day for 60 days or 90 days before we see you in spring training, you're going to have a better feel for the ground when you get here, and your path is going to be cleaner, and you're going to have a better chance to be connected in your swing. And then, you know, obviously you take it a step further and, you know, facing velocity and facing spin. And I'm big on random training and not block training. You know, like flips is obviously a big part of hitting instruction these days. And flips are good when we're trying to teach movements. And, you know, you do want some block training there when maybe I'm working on a one-hand drill and I'm trying to stay connected and stay to the middle and keep my path clean. But at the same time, once we start getting into the phase of hitting and really preparing for the game, or you just preparing ourselves as a hitter, you want to change speed, you want to change locations, you want to have the mental aspect added to the routine. So where, okay, you're looking away and taking in, or vice versa, or you're looking hard and taking soft, so that there's a decision-making element to their routine. And so, you know, you explain this whole program to hitters, and you hopefully that they grab something from each part of it, you know, the movements, and then the decision making, and then velocity and spin and so forth off machines or arm, whatever it might be. And then, you know, you talk them through, all right, what do you think you need as a hitter? How can we implement everything that we're doing here into what you're doing to make yourself better every day? And, you know, just like I know JD has these, I'm sure he probably still uses them, these little balance bubbles. And he would stand on both of them and do one-hand drills. And then he'd stand on both of them and he'd swing with 2 hands. And I mean, like their stability, they're for like ankle rehab and knee rehab and stuff like that. And so I, you know, when I use those with hitters, young hitters to this day, I'll ask the question, and you know, they're unstable when they first get on it because heck, it's not easy to hit a baseball period, but much less when you're unstable, but it really forces you to kind of use your core to engage and stabilize. And I'll ask the young hitter, if you did this every day for 30 days, do you think your balance and control of your body and your core, would be more engaged in your swing? And the answer is like, yeah, of course. And then I'm like, okay, then why wouldn't you do it? Like if you want to be better, and it may not be that drill. Maybe it's the board between your legs. Maybe it's a step back drill. Whatever it is, like again, everybody's hitting DNA is different. But if there's something that you can do every day to get you better and get you to give you a feel that you need, then why wouldn't you do it? And that's really, the building blocks of a routine and the building blocks of what greatness looks like. Greatness is boring sometimes. Greatness is hard. Greatness is monotonous. Greatness isn't fun or entertaining. And working with major league players, they're no different. Like they grind through drills that are boring and aren't fun and hitting off the tee and going the other way and just whatever it might be. um it's you have to have something that when you get in that batter's box, like for me, I remember I used to hit off the tee a lot just because, we didn't have private lessons and all these hitting facilities and things like that. Like when I was a kid, I hate to admit this, but I would steal at times construction cones, the tall ones, until and I'd take it home with me and I'd have some bootleg net and I would hit off the construction cone until it busted, and then I'd go steal another one. We didn't have a lot of money to go buy the Tanner tees back then, which didn't exist anyway. But um, I remember thinking, okay, in the batter's box when I was struggling at times, you know, that tee swing where you're keeping your front shoulder on the ball and your head on the ball and you're staying short to the ball, like I would reference it when I got in the box. Like I know I can have that feel. I know I can do that when that pitch comes. And again, that's kind of like really the application of your routine into the game. I've made this move before. I trust this move. I know I'm able to do this. And that's kind of the end point. So, but you have to build them up to that. For example, my son was really, the more we learn about hitting and movements, like the pelvis is super important. How the pelvis moves is super important, controlling the pelvis. And his move was a little bit too exaggerated, and the front side was kind of leaking. And so, like he's mentioned yesterday, I'm doing some, the 1970s closed stance drills, to kind of feel him post up against that front side and kind of and get through the swing. And so I'm like, man, awesome! Like attack your weaknesses with a drill. If you have something that you're scuffling with, find a drill that you can start working on to attack that weakness. And then now, as he shows me video of his normal swings, I can see improvement based upon the routine that he has implemented. So you got to get players to buy in. You got to, I remember we had a player who's really good. He's going to play in the big leagues. I'm not going to mention the same with the White Sox, but when I implemented all those drills, like I said earlier, the first spring training or the first instructional league, he was pissed. He didn't like any of them. His dad is a professional hitting coach, so it's like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. He was a really young player at the time, and he was a teenager. And this 2 years later, he won't admit it, but I would watch him using some of the tools and doing the drills, and I'm like, okay, there you go. You know what I mean? Like it worked. Like it took some time, but eventually he started coming around and realizing he might need some of this stuff. So. Again, another long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
No, that was all fantastic information about routines and some great examples right there too. You mentioned that these guys grind obviously at the professional level, playing 100 plus games a season. But would you recommend hitters at younger ages? I mean, do you tell hitters like, hey, you need to be hitting 7 days a week, right? Or do you recommend one day off? Like from like a skill standpoint, what do you think hitters should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I earlier before we came on, I've been doing some lessons, some private instruction lately, and I had this kid who's twitchy, long levers, like got a chance to be pretty good. He's like 14, and I'd worked with him years ago when he was a little guy because he'd kind of come back in the cage, and I said, "You remember all these drills that we should do?" Yes, and I said, "How much have you been practicing lately?" And he goes, his answer was, well, we had a tournament last weekend and then a tournament, 2 weeks before that. And I'm like, how much have you been practicing lately? Like, well, because the dad's like, oh, I've been scuffling in games. He hasn't been really swinging the bat. And I kept going back. Oh, hasn't been practicing. Why? Because, you know, youth baseball or adolescent baseball, high school baseball, we're playing tournaments all the freaking time, right? And we're chasing trophies and so forth. And hey, I love competition. I'm all about competition, but this game's hard. And if you're not practicing your skills, you can't expect to be good at it. So I don't know if there's an exact number. Like for example, I feel like my son hits too much at times. I feel like days off are good because if you're putting in the work and your routine's solid, then I don't think you need to do it 7 days a week at that level necessarily. But you know what? If you enjoy doing it and you feel like I'm all about efficiency. So if go in there and if you're going to hit 7 days a week, fine. I think that's great. Just you should have a routine where you can get it done in half hour, 45 minutes instead of being in there for 2 hours taking 200 swings and getting frustrated. Make sure that you're in there for a purpose, on purpose, doing things that are going to help you get better. So I mean, if you're a high school player, let's just say, for example, and you want to play in college one day, I mean, you should be swinging a bat at least 5 days a week, I would say. I mean, heck, obviously big leaguers are playing every night. Those guys are hitting every day. I mean, and they're taking lots of swings every day to get better. I mean, Mookie Betts won the MVP in 2018. I had to go to the chiropractor at the end of the season and get a bunch of work done because I had thrown him so many freaking baseballs. It was not by accident. What you saw at 7 o'clock was from hours of, and it would be, AB, I don't, let's go back in there. I don't feel it. I'm just like, all right, let's go. And there's sometimes I was like, oh my gosh, are we serious? Are we going again? Okay, let's go, and then there were some days where he's like, I got it, I'm like, thank goodness. Oh, you know, so, but I'd throw every baseball for that experience for him to win the MVP, us to win the World Series. I'd go back and do it all over again in double if I would have had to. Just because, but those guys, it's not by accident. Those guys grind and heck, there's days that JD and even Mookie would go hit in the mornings, and then they'd come and do their maybe abbreviated routine when they got there in the afternoons pregame, and BP, but they do it in the mornings. I mean, I got a chance to manage Manny Ramirez in winter ball. He was 42 years old. He had made $250 million that he had in the bank already. He was the first guy at the ballpark every day. He did yoga on the field. He would walk to center field, which where the cages were in Santiago, I think still are. And he would do his cage routine. He would hit early BP on the field. We had an early BP and then we had regular BP. He would hit in his group in regular BP. And then he'd go in the clubhouse and on his iPad, he'd do eye exercises on this program. And he's talking about, and every day this guy did it. Every day. Like there was not a day that he didn't do it. And you're thinking, wow, like that's what greatness looks like. You don't just show up at 7 and oh wow, those guys are good. Like, you can't roll out of the car at the tournament and think you're going to be good just because you had some skills. Like this is a tough game that you have to really fall in love with, and you have to fall in love with the work and the process of it to really be good. And I think that goes for every sport. I mean, I don't know a ton about Tom Brady, but I would imagine that what we saw when the game started, there was a ton of preparation and a ton of footballs thrown and a ton of footwork done and so forth and so on. So, again, too many long-winded answers. We're going to probably go
It's all
time
great.
there.
I love it. Yeah, if your competition is doing that at the highest level, I mean, geez, yeah, you better be working pretty hard, right? If Manny Ramirez back in, when he was Manny being Manny, yeah, you better be working. You mentioned eye exercises that Manny would do on his iPad. I think vision is something that is, again, it's not talked about a ton, but clearly, like Manny obviously thought that was really important for him to do. What's been your experience with helping hitters with vision? I just want to leave it open-ended because I don't, necessarily want to say like what drills or anything. I'm just kind of curious to hear what you think about vision and helping players with it.
Yeah, I think it's also something that we as a group, as an industry, can get better at teaching. I think we were on to something years ago. I remember when I was a player and I was in spring training with the Mariners in big league camp, and this was 2003. Edgar Martinez, and it was a popular training tool at the time. It was this tennis ball machine on steroids, basically, and it had colored numbers on the tennis ball, and like 1 through 9, and you would, number one, like the balls will start with like 85, and then they go to like 120, and then they would go back to like 95. And Edgar would do it every day, and I would just sit there in awe. And then when he would leave and all the big leaguers were done, I was a AAA player. I would try to hop in there, and you're not hitting it. You're just trying to track and call the number out. You're trying to call the color out at first and then call the number out. And my whole point in saying this is that I did this every day in spring training. And I remember having one of the best spring trainings I ever had. And then when the season started, I felt like the ball looked like a beach ball. And then, I didn't have the machine in AAA that year, so I wasn't able to continue to use it. Um, so I remember like my vision changing. But I remember when I was doing it, it was super helpful. So yeah, I don't know. We didn't really do a lot in the White Sox organization for vision training, and I haven't really been around in my experience in the last 10 years or so coaching where I've seen a program. I've seen people try different things, but I haven't seen anything super effective or super mainstream these days when it comes to vision training. I think it's something that we can kind of dig back into as an industry.
Usually as a coach, you're always reflecting, right, on how things went, how you did, anything that you need to work on or improve upon, day by day, week by week, season by season. What's one thing that you've made a conscious effort to be like, I need to improve in this category, and then improved on it?
Well, I think you're always looking to grow as a coach and get better. And I feel like there's a lot of technology in the game today, and it was a challenge for me, building this kind of program with the White Sox from scratch. To kind of integrate the lab and integrate the biomechanists and the strength conditioning. I thought we were doing a really good job of it by the time I left. Um, I would just say continuing to grow with the technology and how that affects the hitter. I'm really fascinated by the mind and building relationships and getting a player to trust what I'm trying to teach them. And I feel like that's a big strength. I feel like I feel like a lot of really successful coaches these days are very movement centric and are like experts in movement. And I feel like I've evolved and learned a ton about that. Heck, before I got to the Red Sox, I didn't know anything about biomechanics or movements or how movement flow or why it was important. And by the time I left, I feel like I was an expert at it. Just when you work with JD Martinez every day for 2 years, like you get a master's degree in swing mechanics and swing movements, as well as game planning and learning how to really prepare a hitter for an at bat in the major leagues every day. It's there's a lot more to it than just the swing.
What would be
Um,
like, what's an example of that game planning?
So, we have a lot of information now. You have the characteristics of a pitch. You have a pitch there might be a certain spin rate on his breaking ball where it's gonna really break more than a guy who has less. Um, there might be he might have a low release and the fastball really stay true and not his IVB might stay really high and I mean there's lots of different characteristics of game planning a pitch in the big leagues, and so you have to be able to share that with a hitter. Hey, there's no slug on this guy's fastball, for example. Like, do not chase his fastball to the top of the zone. Do not try to take this guy deep. Like, really quiet swing thoughts. Single this guy to death because I remember in the big leagues, for example, there was a guy who had an electric fastball. I can't remember who it was. We had a young player, and he had a lollipop steal a strike breaking ball, and we told the kid, listen, like Nobody hits the fastball. Like people are hitting like 150 off this fastball, but that breaking ball that he tries to just sit on it, and I remember the hitter going 0 for 4 and swung at 4 fastballs, and you're like, dude, we told you, you know what I mean? Like, and hit like 4 like weak ground balls. Like that's the guy's trap. Every big league hitter has a trap. Every big league pitcher has a trap. Every big league pitcher is susceptible somewhere. And so you have to find those. You have to study the video. You have to study the pitch characteristics. You have to study the movement patterns of the pitch. And then you bring that to the hitters meeting and you're like, all right, here's the game plan to we're going to stay disciplined and we're not going to swing at this guy's slider today. All right, that's his trap. We're gonna fight with him and the umpire to that outside corner to see who wins, and we're gonna take it, and we're gonna frustrate the heck out of him and make him bring his fastball in there. Now we do that as 9 dudes together. Now we have an offensive game plan to have a chance to win the game. If everybody's just going up there bailing and wailing and just trying to swing at whatever, the pitchers love that, right? They're like, oh, okay, this team doesn't have a plan. This team doesn't have an approach. So the game planning is huge. Like there's so many different pitch characteristics and so many different things that create illusions to a hitter in a game with a certain pitch, and you have to be able to dissect those as a hitting coach, and then be able to explain them in very simplistic terms. Hey, stay above this guy. It's going to ride. Hey, this guy's got big time sink. You got to swing a ball underneath it or a ball above it if it's got ride. Whatever it is, because these days that pitching coaches are excellent at what they do, and they get guys to create all different types of movements on pitches and spins with grips, and then we have to be able to combat that and have a plan to attack that. Now at the lower levels in high school and so forth, I mean, watch the game, watch what he's attacking your teammates with. Watch what his out pitch is. What does he go to with 2 strikes? What does he go to with his runners in scoring position? What's his bread and butter in those situations? And then have your greatest gift as a hitter is the ability to anticipate. We can talk about swing mechanics, we can talk about all these things, but you have to be able to hunt and be ready to hit something before it gets there. You can't react to pitches, you have to receive pitches. And if you are waiting just to see it first, it's too late. If you're not on the hunt for something, then somebody's hunting you and you're going to get beat.
I like that. Not you don't react to, what'd you say? You don't react, you what?
If you don't react to pitches, you receive them. So if you watch the video of Albert Pujols facing Jenny Finch, you can watch it on YouTube. She strikes him out on 4 pitches. The softball pitcher Jenny Finch, whatever. They did this thing in Vegas like in 2004 where she faced all these big leaguers, and I think that the only guy that made contact was Sean Casey, and he had like a dribbler like to the first baseman. Okay, and so why couldn't those guys hit her? Like the velocity, if you do the numbers, it's the same as them facing 95. But why could they didn't like why? How does she blow away Albert Pujols in his prime? Well, because he'd never seen that before. He'd never seen that angle, so he couldn't anticipate it. He had to react to the pitch. Well, 90 something miles an hour, it's too late. Like you can't react. So now if she had faced that pitching for if Albert Pujols had faced softball pitching for 2 months, now he's got some confidence to anticipate where that ball is going to be before it leaves her hand. It's just like you watch tennis and you watch these amazing tennis players, professional tennis players receive and return serves at 130 miles an hour. Like, how do they do that? Are they waiting till the ball leaves the racket? No chance. They're anticipating a move this way based upon some sort of tell from that other tennis player. Why? Because they've had thousands and millions of reps. So big leaguers have had thousands of millions of reps from up here, so they know how to anticipate that. But they didn't know how to anticipate this. So then they're reacting to this pitch, and it's too late. It's too late at that point. There's too much velocity and spin, and you're just swatting at flies. And if you watch the video, Albert Pujols swings at pitches that aren't even close, and he had no chance. And so, that's my that's my greatest example of that. That you really have to be able to anticipate a pitch before it gets there. And that goes back to the mental game. If you're not confident and you're not, and your thought process is in an attack mode, then, and you're waiting to see what's getting ready to happen, then you're beat.
All fantastic. I'm gonna go back and watch that Jenny Finch Albert Pujols after we get done with this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're 100% spot on with the anticipating and not reacting. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I heard you're pretty good at this. That's picking up pitchers, tipping pitches.
I wonder where you heard that from. Wow. Um, yeah, something you learn along the way. I mean, I think Alex Cora is probably the best I've ever seen, as far as doing that goes. And that's kind of the mental warfare of baseball is either knowing what's coming from a tip from a pitcher or um, making him think you know what's coming,
Mhm.
which is even better sometimes because that gets them paranoid, and it's that's the mental game at the highest level. Little competitive advantages in Major League Baseball, and even at high levels of college baseball, heck, at any level, any competitive advantage, it can be a difference maker. So if I have, for example, if I have a tip on a pitcher, a reliever, I've done the studying. I know that his glove pops when he grabs his breaking ball, and he comes in a game with the bases loaded, and we know that as a team, and then we can take his breaking ball and we're sitting on. We know that when the fastball's coming, boom, double, 3-run double, we're ahead. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that happened in Boston in 2018 where we had a tip on a guy, and he came in the game in a leverage situation, and we knew what was coming based upon something. Heck, there was a time that a guy bit his lip on the fastball and did nothing with his lip on a breaking ball. And so, he comes set and feeling like this, you're like, all right, here it comes. Here comes the heater. So yeah, man, like if you study, when I was a college coach, I was a college coach briefly because COVID hit. Um, we went to Auburn and swept Auburn, and they were number 2 in the country when I was at UCF, and they had 3 starters who were dudes. They were all really good, and we had all their pitches. And it wasn't because they thought we were stealing their signs from Tim Hudson, who was the pitching coach, because college you give the signs. Now they have the all the devices, but it had nothing to do with any of that. They were tipping. They were just straight up tipping. If you study the video and you watch pitchers, um, many of them will tip. Not all of them will tip. Many of them will tip, and that affects the running game too. Because if you know breaking ball's coming, based upon how what his movements are, then hey, we can run right here. We can take it 90 feet, and 90 feet in baseball will get you beat. So. Um, yeah, it's when I was a coordinator with the White Sox, it was part of our program. When I came into town, I wanted the bench players hunting a tip. I wanted somebody finding a tip on something. I wanted us at least trying to find something on every pitcher that came in the game.
Well,
Uh,
what's the percentage you think of pitchers out there? Let's just say maybe college level, college game. How many times is a pitcher out there tipping his pitches?
Oof, I'd say if he doesn't have if he doesn't have a coach from the University of Miami on the staff, who I think down that's my home. I didn't play there, but I think that those guys have been chasing tips since the Ron Frazier days. Um, I think if you're not, I think 75% or so, I'd say, of pitchers that tip. I would say, that's something. If you study and you know what you're looking for, that you'll find something.
What's the best way
Um,
to go about relaying that to the players, or are you teaching that to them to pick up when they're in the box?
Yeah, I'm not big on the relaying. I don't mind relaying from second. I feel like if you can see a grip in the glove or you can see something at second, I feel like that's fair game. And I have this argument, oh, that's cheating. I mean, listen, if Tom Brady comes to the line and you're giving away your defense and he checks the play, then that's your fault. That's
Right,
not his, that's not
right.
cheating. That's the game, right? So if you're giving away your pitch because your glove is wide open and your glove is flaring when you grab your changeup, That's your fault. What do you want me to do? Not look at it? And so, there we would tell hitters, okay, when he comes to the plate, he comes set really high on the fastball and it's a lot lower on the breaking ball. And it's obvious. So there you go. I mean, like a lot of times, I remember that Auburn series, they were so paranoid about changing their signs. And I was laughing because I'm like, your dudes are tipping so bad that we don't even have to look at your signs. You just look at them. They're giving away every pitch. So, here you had, one of the best teams in the country at the time, and nothing against Auburn or their coaching staff. Those guys are super smart and do a great job. But at the time, those guys were all tipping. And so if you study it, if you take the time and you study it, you can find stuff. So
That's crazy that Tim Hudson coaching there, being a big league pitcher, and his pitchers are tipping.
well, you know what? I mean, it's heck, big league pitchers are tipping,
That's true.
and
Good point.
and
Good
and
point.
so it's not really his fault. I mean, when you're a college coach, you got a lot to worry about, right? And you're trying to get these guys number one, just to practice on time, and you're trying to get them to focus, and you're trying to get them to execute, and then you're trying to, do the PFP. And I mean, there's just a ton to worry about. Heck, but if I can get the guy on the mound at 7 o'clock and delivering the ball, throwing strikes, I'm pretty happy, right? So I mean, those college, it's a challenge sometimes in coaching in college. So, nothing against those guys at all. That's part of the deal. Heck, there's big league teams, right now that have people in place just looking for their own pitchers to see if they're tipping. Um, I feel like that in 2019, our pitchers didn't pitch well in Boston. I feel like we were paranoid about our own other teams having our stuff and our guys tipping, and our pitchers were paranoid about it. And I feel like it affected their mental game and affected their performance. Kind of like I said earlier, if you're worried about it, there's I'm not going to mention his name, but one of the best pitchers in the big leagues. The way to beat him is not to beat him head on head. It's to make him think he's tipping, because if he thinks he's tipping, he starts getting paranoid, and then he walks a guy, and then there's a concentration lapse, and he leaves something over the plate, and you got him. So I mean, it's again, when you get to that level, the mental warfare is really a huge part of the game. And so when I went from the big leagues I went right from the big leagues to coaching in college the very next year, and so I was able to take a lot of what we were doing and implement that into college baseball, and there's a lot more college players tipping than there are professional players, just because I don't think as many people are, like I said, that just to get the guy at 7 o'clock to be delivering strikes is a challenge. So heck, if it's tipping, hopefully the other team's not noticing. You know what I mean? Like we'll fix that later type thing. So but yeah, it's something I've developed, I've learned and developed over the years as a coach. I saw how important it was, at the highest level. But when I'd managed in the minor leagues, I'd never paid attention to it. Again, why? Because I have so many other things to worry about. I'm trying to get, this guy's is late because he's got a family issue. This guy's getting moved up, moved down. Like, I'm not concerned if their pitcher's tipping tonight or giving the signs away. But all of a sudden you get to the big leagues, and every game matters, and every winning and losing. Yeah, and the same at the college level, every game matters. Winning and losing is critical. Then you're starting to pay attention to the little things in the game. So
Did you enjoy the college game?
I did. I really did enjoy it. It was coming from the big leagues to college, and those kids were so eager to learn from me. It was, hey, what do you know about hitting? And they were so excited. It was just it was a breath of fresh air. And then Greg Lovelady and Ted Tom at UCF were so welcoming and allowed me to kind of really implement my program and work with the guys, and gave me freedom. And then the competition. Every game is important. Every game matters. There's only 56 games, so um, and then dealing with that age of player, I hadn't dealt with that age of player in a long time, and it was just neat to be able to connect with them and share experiences with them, and then try to motivate them and teach them. It's just like a blank canvas. When you get professional players in the big leagues, they've learned a lot, they've experienced a lot. So again, you're just fine tuning things, but in college, you're building players, from the ground up, one brick at a time. And I really welcome that challenge. And then taking that into be a hitting coordinator and dealing with the same age of players and even younger at times in the Dominican Academy was super refreshing, and being able to teach and develop young players. So Yeah, I really liked the college game. It was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, Ted Tom, he's a great coach. I've gotten to know him a little bit and went down there and saw him actually. So he's awesome.
Hmm.
I appreciate you coming on. If somebody wants to learn more about, your program, we talked about how like you've developed essentially this mental game program. Like
Hmm.
how should they get in touch with you? Where should they follow you? Like what's the best way to go about it?
Yeah, my you can follow me on Twitter. I think it's a Barkett 17. I'm sure you'll post this and
Yep.
maybe tag my Twitter name on there. Baseballprosacademy.com is my website. The website is I haven't paid too much attention to it. I do a lot of my stuff just kind of word of mouth. But there's ways to contact me on there, email and so forth, and baseballproscamp@gmail.com, all one word. And so those are just some different ways to grab me. But yeah, I'm in Central Florida, and I've been speaking to some high school programs throughout the country actually via Zoom and teaching this core. It's an acronym for championship mindset, owning your process, relentless desire, and then enthusiastic or enthusiasm. And so there's a curriculum for each letter that I teach, and it's been great. I've gotten great feedback, and telling stories along the way. I'm actually working on a book where I talk about the core of the 2018 Boston Red Sox, and how they really were great examples of this mental game for 162 games plus the playoffs and the World Series. So a lot of great mental game stories on that team. Obviously, nothing better I feel like than Nathan Eovaldi in the World Series, pitching into the late hours of the night in extra innings and just showing grit, determination. So there was countless examples of that on that team, and really taught me a lot. And so again, just working on some different things, but those are the ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on, man.
All right, Patrick, thanks for having me, man.